Welcome to Azure Simplified. In this module we are going to have an overview of the Azure governance model in which we will see what is the hierarchical structure of Azure, what are management groups, subscription groups, resource groups, how Azure Policy works, how and what are resource tags. What is the use of RBAC, role-based access control, finally Azure landing zones. Azure's hierarchical structure provides a robust framework for efficiently managing cloud resources. In Azure, the tenant root group refers to the top-level management group within an Azure Active Directory (AD) tenant, essentially acting as the highest point in the management group hierarchy where all other management groups and subscriptions fall under. Management groups, which facilitate the organization of multiple subscriptions, allowing for consistent access control, policy enforcement, and compliance across an enterprise. This level is particularly useful for large organizations with numerous subscriptions, as it enables centralized management. Below management groups are subscriptions, which act as logical containers that define a boundary for resource management and billing. Each subscription can hold multiple resources and is typically used to separate environments or departments within an organization. The next level is resource groups, which serve as logical containers for organizing and managing Azure resources collectively. They provide a convenient way to manage and deploy resources together, making it easier to apply policies, track costs, and maintain organizational structure. Finally, at the base of the hierarchy are the resources themselves. These are the individual instances of services like virtual machines, storage accounts, or SQL databases that you create and manage within Azure. Each resource is deployed within a resource group, ensuring that they are organized and can be managed collectively. This hierarchical structure helps organizations efficiently scale, manage costs, and ensure compliance across their cloud environments. Management groups are containers for organizations like Tailwind traders seeking efficient governance across multiple Azure subscriptions. These containers facilitate centralized management of access, policy, and compliance, making them invaluable for maintaining control over complex environments. When designing a management group hierarchy, it is essential to balance depth and breadth. A well-thought-out hierarchy should have a maximum of 3 or 4 levels, avoiding excessive complexity. Tailwind traders can benefit from structuring management groups based on organizational departments, geographical regions, and specific functional needs, such as production and sandbox environments. Implementing top-level management groups for overarching policies and role assignments ensures consistent governance. Additionally, isolating sensitive confidential data within a separate management group enhances security and compliance. By strategically planning the management group hierarchy, Tailwind traders can leverage Azure's capabilities to streamline governance and foster organizational agility. To create resources like databases, virtual machines, web applications, we must have an Azure subscription. There are several types of subscriptions, such as enterprise agreement and pay-as-you-go. Subscriptions can provide separate billing environments, such as development, test, and production. By using subscriptions, you can manage and track costs for your organizational structure. Policies for individual subscriptions can help satisfy different compliance standards. You defined your strategy for the Tailwind traders management group structure. Now you need to determine where to assign subscriptions. Here's one possible solution. Group subscriptions together under management groups. Group together subscriptions that have the same set of policies and Azure role assignments to inherit these settings from the same management group. For Tailwind traders, both the West and East subscriptions can inherit policy settings from the sales management group. Consider administrative management. Subscriptions provide a management boundary, which allows for a clear separation of concerns. Will each subscription for Tailwind traders need a separate administrator, or can you combine subscriptions? The corporate management group could have a single subscription for both the HR and legal departments. When it comes to subscriptions, one size doesn't fit all. A solution that works for one business unit might not be suitable for another. Explore your options. Resource groups are logical containers into which Azure resources are deployed and managed. These resources can include web apps, databases, and storage accounts. You can use resource groups to place resources of similar usage, type, or location in logical groups. Organize resources by life cycle so all the resources can be created or deleted at the same time. Apply role permissions to a group of resources or give a group access to administer a group of resources. Use resource locks to protect individual resources from deletion or change. Resource groups have their own location, region, assigned. This region is where the metadata is stored. If the resource group's region is temporarily unavailable, you can't update resources in the resource group because the metadata is unavailable. The resources in other regions still function as expected, but you can't update them. Resources in the resource group can be in different regions. A resource can connect to resources in other resource groups. You can have a web application that connects to a database in a different resource group. Resources can be moved between resource groups with some exceptions. You can add a resource to or remove a resource from a resource group at any time. Resource groups can't be nested. Each resource must be in one, and only one, resource group. Resource groups can't be renamed. Consider group by type. Group resources by type for on-demand services that aren't associated with an app. For Tailwind traders, you can have a resource group for the SQL databases, SQL-RG, and a separate resource group, WebRG, for the web services. Consider group by app. Group resources by app when all resources have the same policies and life cycle. This method can also be applied to test or prototype environments. For Tailwind traders, App 1 and App 2 can have separate resource groups. Each group can have all the resources for the specific application. Resource tags are another way to organize resources. Tags provide extra information, or metadata, about your resources. A resource tag consists of a name-value pair. For example, name equals department and value equals finance. You can assign one or more tags to each Azure resource, resource group, or subscription. Tags can be applied to a resource group. However, tags applied to a resource group aren't inherited by the resources in the group. The IT-aligned tag option is useful for tracking workload, application, function, or environment criteria. The business-aligned tag option helps to focus on accounting, business ownership, cost responsibility, and business criticality. Consider using Azure Policy to apply tags and enforce tagging rules and conventions. Resource tagging is only effective if used consistently across an organization. Tags can be broadly categorized as per different tag types like functional, classification, accounting, partnership, purpose. Example in the below table. Functional tags categorize resources according to their purpose within a workload. Classification tags identify a resource by how it's used and what policies apply to it. Consider using Azure Policy to apply tags and enforce tagging rules and conventions. Resource tagging is only effective if used consistently across an organization. Azure Policy is a service in Azure that enables you to create, assign, and manage policies to control or audit your resources. Azure Policy lets you define both individual policies and groups of related policies, called initiatives. Azure Policy comes with many built-in policy and initiative definitions. Azure policies are inherited down the hierarchy. Apply policy to create resource in only one region equals Central India. All resource groups in the subscriptions should follow the above policy. On the Policy pane, select Compliance and locate the audit VMs that do not use Managed Disks policy assignment. The compliance state for a new policy assignment takes a few minutes to become active and provide results about the policy state. You can delete a policy assignment from compliance or from assignments. To remove the policy assignment created in this article, follow these steps. On the Policy pane, select Compliance and locate the audit VMs that do not use Managed Disks policy assignment. Select the policy assignments ellipsis and select Delete Assignment. Consider how Azure Policy is different from Role-Based Access Control, RBAC. You use Azure Policy to ensure the resource state is compliant with the organization's business rules. You implement Azure RBAC to focus on user actions at different scopes. Azure RBAC manages who can access Azure resources, what they can do with those resources. Azure RBAC allows you to grant access to Azure resources that you control. Azure RBAC evaluates each request for access and determines if access should be blocked, not allowed, or allowed. To make role assignments more manageable, avoid assigning roles directly to users. Instead, assign roles to groups. Your first step is to accurately define each role definition and its permissions. Next, assign the roles to specific users, groups, and service principals. Lastly, scope the roles to management groups, subscriptions, resource groups, and resources. Assign each role at the highest scope level that meets the requirements. As you plan your access control strategy, it's a best practice to grant users the least privilege they need to get their work done. Automated processes here refer to scripts, services, or applications that interact with cloud resources without direct human intervention. These processes typically operate at the resource level, meaning they have specific permissions to manage or interact with individual resources within a cloud environment. Observers, auditors, and reviewers' roles typically fall under the reader category. Their primary responsibility is to view and monitor resources without making any changes. Help desk personnel, developers, users managing resources roles typically fall under the resource-specific and custom categories where relevant action is either defined using custom roles or delete/manage roles are defined using contributor role. Admins typically fall under the owner role. They have the highest level of control, including managing access permissions and making critical changes to cloud resources. An Azure landing zone is a pre-configured cloud environment that provides a secure, scalable, and well-governed foundation for deploying workloads in Azure. To use an analogy, shared city utilities like water, gas, and electricity are available to new homes before they're built. In the same manner, the network, identity and access management, policies, and monitoring configuration for landing zones must be ready before you try to deploy. These utilities for landing zones need to be active and ready to help streamline the application migration process. Why use Azure landing zones? Standardization ensures best practices across all deployments. Security and compliance implements Azure Policy, RBAC, and governance. Scalability supports multiple workloads across teams and business units. Automation uses infrastructure as code for deployment, Terraform, Bicep, ARM templates. How to deploy an Azure landing zone. Terraform, most widely used, modular and scalable. Bicep, Azure native alternative to Terraform. ARM templates, JSON-based infrastructure deployment. Azure Blueprints, for policy-based governance, but being deprecated.
Don't forget to spread the love.